At a tense will reading, a black teen endures cruel taunts until a shocking twist reveals she's inherited everything, flipping the room's power dynamic in an instant. The room was a cavern of dark wood and heavy air, its grandeur oppressive. Crystal, a wiry black teen with braids pulled tight, perched on a stiff leather chair, her worn sneakers scuffing the polished floor. Her hands twisted in her lap, fingers digging into her palms as she tried to shrink into herself. The long mahogany table stretched before her, surrounded by relatives she barely recognized. Cousins in tailored suits, aunts with gaudy jewelry, uncles with slicked-back hair. Their polished appearances screamed wealth, but their eyes were predatory, glinting with greed as they waited for the will to be read. Crystal felt their stares, sharp and cold, slicing through her like she was an intruder in their world. Aunt Lorraine, her crimson lipstick stark against her pinched face, leaned toward Uncle Harold, her whisper cutting through the silence. "Why's she here? The housekeeper's kid doesn't belong." Harold's laugh was low, his gold watch flashing as he tugged his cufflinks. Crystal's face burned, her jaw tightening, but she kept her gaze fixed on the table's grain, tracing its swirls to anchor herself. She was used to their barbs. Years of trailing her mother through the estate's halls had taught her to endure. But the words landed like blows in this formal setting, where she was so exposed. Cousin Marcus, lounging with a smug grin, joined in. "Bet she thinks she's getting a handout. Cute." More chuckles rippled around the table, each one tightening the knot in Crystal's stomach. Her shoulders hunched slightly, her body curling inward as if to shield itself, but her eyes stayed steady, betraying none of the hurt. She was an outsider here, the only one without a claim to the family's legacy. Or so they thought. The lawyer, a gaunt figure with wire-rimmed glasses, shuffled his papers, his throat clearing, slicing through the murmurs. "We'll begin," he said, his voice flat. The room stilled, but Lorraine shot Crystal another look, her voice syrupy with venom. "Don't get comfortable, girl. This isn't your place." The words hung in the air, and Crystal's fingers twitched, her nails biting deeper into her skin. She wanted to vanish, to escape the weight of their scorn, but something, maybe her mother's quiet strength, maybe her own stubborn spark, kept her rooted. Her chest rose with a slow breath, and though her heart raced, she lifted her chin just a fraction, a silent refusal to break. The relatives exchanged glances, their smirks widening as they sensed her discomfort. Another aunt, draped in pearls, muttered about charity cases, and the room's laughter swelled, a cruel chorus. Crystal's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes, dark and unwavering, flicked briefly to the lawyer, then back to the table. She was here for a reason, even if they couldn't see it, even if she wasn't sure herself. Crystal's body language would start subtle, but telling. Early on, her shoulders are slightly hunched, her hands clasped tightly, fingers interlocking as a self-soothing gesture. Her sneakers tap faintly, a nervous tick that betrays her discomfort. Her face is guarded, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes downcast to avoid confrontation. As the taunts escalate, Lorraine's whisper, Marcus's jab, her posture stiffens, her shoulders drawing tighter as if bracing against a physical blow. Her jaw clenches, a micro-movement that hints at suppressed anger, and her eyes narrow briefly when Lorraine's "not your place" lands. A flash of defiance quickly masked. The visual cues of her resilience emerge gradually. When the laughter peaks, her tapping foot stills, grounding her. Her hands, once fidgety, relax slightly, one resting flat on her thigh. A quiet assertion of control. Her breathing, initially shallow, slows deliberately, her chest rising with purpose. The pivotal moment comes when she lifts her chin, a small but powerful gesture, her eyes locking onto the table with newfound focus. A faint tightening around her mouth suggests resolve, not defeat. The camera could linger on her steady gaze and the subtle straightening of her spine, contrasting the relatives' sneers to show her inner strength holding firm against their cruelty. The lawyer's voice cut through the room's lingering sneers, his words deliberate. The estate of Mr. Reginald Thornton is to be distributed as follows. Papers rustled, and the relatives leaned forward, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Crystal sat rigid, her heart pounding, still stinging from their taunts. She expected nothing. Her mother's years of service hadn't earned them a place in this family's world. The lawyer's gaze flicked briefly to her, unreadable, before he continued. To my granddaughter, Crystal Marie Thornton, I bequeath the entirety of my estate, properties, accounts and assets valued at $47 million. A gasp choked the room. Lorraine's wineglass froze mid-sip, her face blanching. Harold's jaw dropped, his cufflinks forgotten. Marcus sputtered, "What?" as the others exchanged stunned glances. Crystal's breath caught, her mind reeling. Granddaughter? The word echoed. Impossible. She'd been the housekeeper's daughter, the outsider, yet the lawyer's document, stamped and final, named her. Whispers erupted, sharp and frantic. "There's got to be a mistake," Lorraine snapped, her voice shrill. The lawyer's stern look silenced her. "It's unequivocal. Crystal inherits everything." The room spun for Crystal. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the table, processing the weight of it all. She wasn't just included, she was chosen. The family's greed had blinded them, and now their empire was hers. If this scene were part of a video, how would you visualize the relatives' reactions to the shocking revelation? And what specific camera angles or visual effects would emphasize the dramatic shift in power toward Crystal? The relatives' reactions would be a chaotic symphony of disbelief and outrage. Lorraine's face contorts, her lips parting as her wineglass tilts, a slow-motion drip of red staining her dress. Harold's hands slam the table, his watch glinting under the chandelier. Marcus leans back, eyes wide, muttering denials. The camera sweeps in close-ups, Lorraine's trembling mouth, Harold's bulging veins, the aunt's pearls clutched in panic. A wide shot captures the table's chaos, their frantic gestures clashing with Crystal's stillness. To emphasize the power shift, the camera lingers on Crystal's face, her eyes widening, then steadying with realization. A subtle zoom on her hands, unclenching, signals her growing confidence. Low-angle shots frame her against the towering room, making her appear commanding. A faint, warm light could halo her, contrasting the relatives' dimming presence with a slow pan showing their faces souring as her silhouette dominates. The sound design, muffled gasps, a rising heartbeat, would amplify her ascent, cementing her as the undeniable center of power. The room crackled with tension, the lawyer's words still reverberating. Crystal, the scorned teen, now held the keys to a $47 million empire. The relatives sat frozen, their earlier smugness shattered. Lorraine's face twisted, her crimson lips curling into a scowl as she gripped her wineglass, knuckles white. Harold's hands, once casually adjusting his tie, now clenched into fists, his gold watch catching the chandelier's light like a warning. Marcus slumped, his smug grin replaced by a slack-jawed stare, while the aunts whispered furiously, their pearls clicking in agitation. Their eyes, once dismissive, now burned with envy and disbelief, darting to Crystal as if she'd stolen their birthright. Crystal felt the shift, a seismic change in the air. Her heart still raced, but her trembling hand steadied, resting calmly on her lap. She lifted her gaze, meeting Lorraine's glare head-on, her dark eyes unyielding. The room's power had flipped. She was no longer the outsider, the help's kid. The estate, the sprawling mansion, the accounts, they were hers. Lorraine's voice broke the silence, brittle and sharp. "This is absurd. She's not even—" The lawyer cut her off, his tone icy. "It's final." Crystal's posture straightened, her shoulders squaring as she absorbed her new reality. The relatives' whispers grew desperate, their greed exposed and impotent. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her presence now commanded the room. Their scorn had fueled her resolve, and in their stunned silence she held the reins. If this scene were part of a video, now how would you depict the visual and auditory elements to highlight the relatives' envy and Crystal's newfound authority, and what specific techniques would underscore the power dynamics reversal? The relatives' envy would be visceral. Close-ups capture Lorraine's twitching eye, her wineglass trembling. Harold's fists tighten, veins pulsing, while Marcus's slumped posture radiates defeat, his fingers raking through his hair. The aunt's pearls gleam as their hands fidget, their whispers a low hiss. A muted green filter over their shots could evoke jealousy, their faces contorted in tight frames to trap their rage. The camera pans across their sour expressions, lingering on each to savor their downfall. Auditory cues, stifled gasps, the clink of jewelry, a discordant violin hum amplify their unraveling. Crystal's authority shines in contrast. A wide shot frames her at the table's head, the chandelier's glow casting a regal light on her face. Her slow, deliberate breath, it amplified in the mix, grounds the scene. The camera tilts upward, her chin raised, eyes steady, as the relatives shrink in blurred foreground shots. A warm, golden hue bathes her, her silhouette sharp against their chaos. Slow motion captures her hands unfolding, a subtle smile flickering, quiet but commanding. The sound shifts to a rising, triumphant orchestral swell, her heartbeat fading into silence, cementing her dominance. Background, visually erasing their influence. Sound design anchors her transformation. The relatives' earlier jeers fade into a low, muffled hum, overtaken by a rising orchestral swell, strings and a soft piano motif signaling victory. Her heartbeat, once rapid, slows to a calm pulse, syncing with her steps. A subtle echo of her mother's voice, "Hold your head high," could layer faintly, tying her strength to her roots. The relative's silence is deafening, broken only by the faint creak of the door as she nears it, a sonic punctuation of her exit. Visual motifs emphasize her shift. Her worn sneakers, once a symbol of her outsider status, are framed in a close-up as they cross the threshold, now a badge of authenticity. The doorway, ornate and towering, becomes a portal to her new reality, its frame widening in a slow zoom to amplify her emergence. Auditory motifs include a recurring chime, soft but clear, each note marking a step in her ascent. Pacing accelerates slightly as she reaches the door, a quick cut to her hand on the handle. Steady, unhesitant, before a final wide shot of her silhouette against the bright hall beyond, the relatives reduced to shadows. This sequence, blending slow builds with sharp cuts, cements her transformation from humiliated teen to empowered heir, her triumph both intimate and monumental.